This is Daybreak. Thank you for staying with us and welcome back. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Dr. Abraham Rugo is with us in studio this morning. He is an economist as well as another economist, Dr. Makali Mulu, the lawmaker representing Kitui Central Constituency, a member of the Budget and Appropriations Committee. We also have with us FCP Abilo Kero, former Mandera County Senator, and as well as political economist. And we as well have with us in studio this morning Wana Ramogi, who is an economist, to talk to us about some of the developments in the country. Gentlemen, thanks for staying with us. And coming to you, Honorable Kero, it appears then that we have talked about other determinant factors that as well inform the state of the economy. Doesn't this then raise the question as to why the numbers projected by the government is not translating in the pockets of Kenyans, in this case, which should in theory means low cost of goods and services as well in the economy, but that isn't the real reality on the ground for the common Kenyans?
Yeah, of course, my colleagues have explained why there is a disconnect between the figures, the statistics that have been published by the government and the reality. But I think what is important to discuss what actually is the problem in this country. And I think many times we have repeated here that the elephant in the room as far as the economy is concerned is the government. Government for two reasons. One, because the government plays a significant role in terms of these figures of high cost of living, and the inflation and so forth, because the government taxes represent a significant proportion of the cost of goods and services in this country. And the government has developed that appetite in the last 2 years, and even before the 2 years, I think, for more taxes. And why is that the case? It's the case because the government has been borrowing more than we've seen the huge debt that the government has accumulated. And the reason is, again, because of poor governance. We keep repeating this story that as long as there is massive corruption in this country, as long as there is misgovernance, wastage, inefficiencies, misplaced priorities, and all these things are responsible for the huge debt that we have accumulated because we are living beyond our means. Okay. So all these things eventually translate into the challenges in the economy that we have seen. Otherwise, I think the only reason why, we are surviving in this country is because of the resilience of Kenyans. The Kenyans would have would have grown this economy, no doubt, if the government was not a bit of a challenge. But I think to give credit, of course, they have focused on some areas. For example, I think although the inflation is low, I think it's something that they have decided to deliberately do, by focusing on the credit squeeze and, raising the interest rates so that they can give inflation roar. This is a textbook case of how to deal with inflation. But I think we are sometimes ignoring the fact that this is an informal economy. 80% of our economy is informal. You can't compare us with America with 3% informal economy. So when you use the same, tools that are used by the U.S. to address your economic, macroeconomic indicators here, then there's these problems that we have just discussed, that, you find figures are going down, but on the ground, in reality, nothing much is happening. So I think there is, lastly, I want to say that part of the challenge, again, the government had in contributing to this problem is that particularly this government seems to be in a hell of a hurry to get things done, particularly to continuously tweak with the existing policies to try and bring change. And these things cost money. For example, these health problems. Why is there so much hurry? Look at education, the bursary. We have told them the last 2 years that the government needs to go slowly on changes in the national policies because they will impact significantly. Anything that impacts on the pocket of Mwananchi, go slow. And that is where the government is not listening. And this is why we are having all the noise about the state of the economy. In fact, Kenyans are now, everyone seems to know about the economy and taxes. That's true. Because they came on that platform. During the campaign, they said, we want to deal with the economy. And so today, every Kenyan knows about the economy. Hali uchumi and the mambo of taxes. And
then how then do we achieve, for example, this status? Because more or less it's as you have mentioned, the textbook case of the economic models, the copy and paste, but which doesn't apply in terms of the complementarity. Because today, if you look at, for example, the American context and the United States. The output per person is now 30% higher than in Western Europe and Canada, for example, and 60% higher than in Japan, gaps that have roughly doubled since 1990. To just give an example, Mississippi may be America's poorest state, but its hard-working residents who partly contribute to its formal economy earn on average more than the Brits, the Canadians, the Germans. And then how then do you consolidate your economy to the extent that you attain such status where even in the informal context, people are able to buy and procure goods and services even when inflation is down as projected?
Look at it even regionally. Look at it regionally. I mean, our economy compared to the countries in the region in terms of many aspects. For example, in terms of the revenue generation, we collect more revenue than all these other countries in the region combined. But more importantly, when you look at the cost of living also, it may be high, but look at the way, it's similar to what you have just said about Mississippi. When you look at the way people are paid in this country, you can't compare with what happens in the region. The state of the cost, you know, the living status is a bit more better than in some of these areas in terms of the way the people are paid and so forth. But this is not about the concern that I think Kenyans have. The main concern Kenyans have is that the cost of goods and services have become very high. The cost of living is high because of two reasons. One, the huge amount of taxes that are on these products. You'll be surprised when you go and see how much taxes contribute to the price of certain goods and services. And then you realize that it's because the government is looking for this money. And second is the cost of production, which again sometimes are contributed to factors that government can be responsible. For example, the power. The cost of power becomes a major expense. The cost of infrastructure, you know, many other costs, cost of corruption. All these things build up into the cost of the goods and services. So I think, yes, Kenyans can, in the long term, some of these measures, of course, can help in the productivity and can help in increasing the economy. But in the short term, I think that it's important for the government to address some of the challenges that are being mentioned, particularly those that contribute to the high cost of living.
And Mr. Odhiambo, the paper's also this morning reporting the promise of 21,000 jobs overseas by the government. About a fortnight ago, it was 100,000.
Right.
It's a projection of, in this case, is it a self-inflicted damage that we are unable to create more jobs in our economic setup, then create a base where you can tax more people and expand that bracket with decent income, decent jobs and decent incomes. Isn't this, in hindsight, also a case of missing the point for the government and washing our dirty linen abroad in saying that we are creating jobs abroad, yet when in our own economic setup, we can't?
Well, let me at least be the devil's advocate. I have done significant research on labor economics, and the world is now a global village. More and more people are getting jobs across borders, across the world. So, in other words, it's a good thing that there are job opportunities. What I dislike is twofold. One, that most of these opportunities opening up are domestic workers' job opportunities. So you find a diploma holder from Moi University going to be a domestic worker in the Gulf. It's not attractive. And that brings me now back to your point, which is, can we create opportunities for this person who's graduated from Moi University within the country? And the answer is yes, we can. There is a textbook example, if I can use the phrase again, of how Kibaki did this. What Kibaki did is, first of all, instead of increasing the tax rates, he was concerned more about the revenue collection. Because I'm sure all the men on this bench know that these two things mean two different things. Yeah. You can increase the rates and miss on the revenue collection, as we are doing right now. So Kibaki ensured that he concentrated his eyes on revenue collection, which means then you have your taxpayers as collaborators in the whole process. Kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea. And we all remember that. But and there were better there are better situations right now that this government can use. I mean, the economy is a lot larger right now than it was then. We have more technology opportunities that are opening up that you can actually take advantage of. The digital space has opened up. You can work from anywhere in the world. We have better relations. In those days, I think the only guys who could give us money or could do business with Kenya were the Germans and the Americans and the Brits. Today, the East has opened up for opportunities. The point, what I'm trying to say is, for us to create jobs locally, it's one, we need to focus on lowering those taxes and focus our eyes on raising the tax revenue as opposed to raising the tax rates. Number two, if we are going to attract investment, then we need to concentrate our eyes on attracting investment as opposed to having conversations with the Gulf countries on how our young people can go and be maids there and work in a very unsavory circumstances while there. But number three, I also want to insist that public debt, domestic borrowing, is crowding out the private sector. And we need to have a conversation on the rates that the government has raised. We are at 12% CBR. That means that if I'm going to borrow, it's going to be at 20%. And the government is borrowing at almost the same amount. Obviously, the bank will do business with the government. Finally, and let me finish with saying this, there's this thing of wash-wash that is flooding a lot of money in the economy, and it's making management of inflation and the monetary policy almost impossible, a mission impossible. If we can actually look at how can we handle that so that then we have a better economy, I think we'll get better.
Yeah, and Dr. Rugo, if then the borrowing crowds out the private sector, for example, and you are depending on a minority of Kenyans for your taxation because of the informalization of our economy, doesn't that then affect in effect the already overtaxed minority whose pay slips are thinning by the day, given the introduction of new taxes by the administration? Yeah,
I think that's the reality, but I wanted to say something first before I come to your question, that I think the effort by government to try and find jobs for Kenyans, and now we are talking about jobs in their thousands, tens of thousands, 20, 21,000, 100,000. When you have a burden of unemployed youth in millions, where do you take the rest? That's a big question. And the rest are not going to be employed by government. Public sector cannot be the employer of the people in a country. The reason for that is that it provides an enabling environment. And I just wanted to emphasize that the way to grow employment in this country is to improve the business environment. You improve the business environment by not anything that is magical, by lowering the costs of running business, and energy is a big part of that, by improving your regulatory framework, but also reducing the cost of compliance and payment of taxes. But let me come to what you've asked. That's the hue and cry right now. It's becoming very expensive to be employed in Kenya or to have a regular income. It's becoming very expensive because take an example of somebody, and these are very few people, perhaps, anybody who earns, say, 1 million shillings, has just in this 1 year alone is going to part with about 480,000 just to Shire and Chief, and the housing levy.
After deductions.
After deductions, more.
The deductions.
Yeah. So 40,000 more per month is going. If you go down, and I think even Citizen had done some numbers, as you go down, everybody is going to be losing some extra, much more. And this is not tax. This is on top of tax because it's on gross. It's not after tax. So what this basically means that, and you don't have many, because as was rightly put here, the people who are employed form a very small percentage of the total, people who have incomes in this country. But having said that, then you want to make an environment that is, first of all, very conducive for these kind of people who want to come here. Big businesses that also want to keep their executives here, because also you also want that kind of, in terms of taxation. But you also want to address the other thing that we don't talk about. Yeah. I mentioned it in passing, but let me now explain it a bit more. This black tax, we call it black tax, social safety net, this provision where anybody with an income provides for other family members. When you break down the things that we, the WhatsApp groups that you are in, are largely around three things. Mm-hmm. Initially, it used to be largely about medical expenses, holding funerals constant. So it used to be medical expenses, a bit of education, children you are paid school fees for. But now increasingly, it's becoming buying food. Mm-hmm. Buying food, people send you and say, I have no food. And this is not, they're not.
Which is the most basic.
Which is very basic, yeah. Which then tells you that if you address the cost of healthcare, affordability, access, doctors are there, nurses are there, facilities are there, equipment is there, you already enable people to have more disposable income. That's for a fact. Two, if you address the cost of education, and I think this is a challenge even to Mheshimiwa here, I think it is time to consolidate all these bursaries, because I think we are wasting more than we are, we are improving. We need to have a conversation around just all this multiplicity, of bursaries and capitation and what have you. But then lastly is to address the cost of food. Mm-hmm. I know there's been a big debate about cost control and whether we need to have price caps on some of these food items. I've been in countries where there is a price cap. That the cost of, potatoes cannot go past here. And then, of course, it means that government provides subsidies to farmers and the like. Because if you don't address those factors, then it means that the burden continues to be more and more, and even when you increase taxation, you are doing one of the two things. First of all, you are either making sure that this person is not able to meet their daily costs, or you are having them choose who they do not have to support, because they also still need to, So for me, employment creation becomes a critical part, and I hope it's going to be part of those things that we acknowledge that this is not working, because there are millions of the people who do not have incomes, or people who had incomes and are losing jobs because every day you hear company X is downsizing, company X is laying off people because they are not able to meet. It's sending the wrong signals, even for would-be investors. They would be concerned. If I was an investor, I would be concerned. Yeah. Do I want to go to that economy where actually others are running away from? That's the interconnection. Yeah.
And Dr. Makali, coming to you, because this is a presentation made before the National Assembly by the Controller of Budget, Dr. Margaret Nyakango, and she said the economic activity is so hostile, so even if the head of state, she meant the president, goes and gets investors into the country, they will come and explore and go back because of the economic situation, which is not good for their investment. It appears there are these key concerns and the constant red flags that are pointed out by key institutions of government, and to which the state is dead against in terms of following or heeding their advice.
If you are an investor, what you want is to make money. You want to make profits and grow your company, and if it's owned by many people, then you want also to make more profit for your shareholders. And in a situation where you come to a country to find the environment for doing business is not conducive, then automatically you think twice. And that's why you see we have companies in this country who are even relocating to other countries. Because what is happening over time, the profit margins keep on shrinking, and then you are not making much. But to me, I think from what my colleagues are saying, I see three things, which if you are serious Kenyan, and you really want to grow this economy, you must keep your eye on. Mm-hmm. The first one is what we are calling revenue collection. Revenue is good for any country because that's what enables a country to implement programs and projects. And this country, when you look at our revenue collection, colleagues have said there are people who are so keen on tax rate without caring how much you collect. There are issues of tax administration itself, where KRA comes in. There are issues of capacity to pay. Because you can be able to collect taxes. You want to collect from me, but I have no capacity. And I think Dr. Ruko has brought that one out very clearly. If you look at the pay slips of most of the employed Kenyans, including those who are seated here.
Yeah.
You'll be surprised. Because the other day we were debating there, because it's not a secret.
Yeah.
SHA alone, the SHIP deductions, members were saying the minimum we are paying is about 30,000 shillings per month. You wake up in one morning and you find your payslip as 30,000 less,
Minus 30,000.
which you had not even planned for from the start of the year. So imagine just a normal Kenyan. I would want to see a number of payslips, but I'm imagining there could be some really negative. That actually when you do all the deductions, you find that you are getting to a negative. And that's why the majority of the Kenyans are saying they wouldn't mind the government giving them the tax and the government remaining with what they are remaining with. Because the tax collected is so high that it takes almost everything out of you. So the issue of revenue collection is the issue we need to focus on. The second thing we must also put our eye on is the issue of expenditure. And I think that has been said here. You know, this country, the way we spend our resources, the issue of prioritization of our expenditure as a country, and those are the issues where we bring the issues of even corruption. Because like today's paper, I don't know the standard of the nation, 14 billion wasted through the universities. The Auditor General is saying universities cannot account for 14 billion because the money has either been lost through waste or graft. And these are the things. Because if through graft we are losing 14 billion, it means then somebody must be able to do something to sort out that hole. The other thing we must keep our eye on, because it's very critical, is the issue of public debt. You know, we might like it or we may not like it. The money we are collecting in this country, out of every 100 shillings, 70% of that money, which is about 70 shillings, is going to matters debt, public debt, which means you have only 30 shillings to plan for all those other important activities in the country. And to me, if we apply our eyes to these three items, I think we can start now bring this economy to reality, because what we are seeing now, we are seeing optics. We are seeing people trying to tell us the economy is doing well, but in reality, every Kenyan can feel. You don't have to be told, you can feel that things are not working well.
And then how then do you, as a parliamentarian, given that you have pointed that out, because there's an accountability, and accountability must rest somewhere. Margaret Nyakango Daktari also further went on when she appeared before the NADCO committee that I've been approving payments for public debt, and I've seen many of those things cannot be identified. You cannot tell what the money was meant for, and therefore there was no economic gain from the money that was borrowed, and that is what I have been doing for a very long time.
Exactly.
Even in the payment process of the public debt.
Yes.
Still, there are loopholes within which money is stolen from the Kenyan people.
I want to say this, Ayub. Maybe we always say I'm a member of the budget committee, but I can tell you I'm also a vice chair of the committee on public debt and privatization. And the things we are picking from that committee, you can't believe. The things we do with our debt, the money we borrow. We have had a lot of sessions with Dr. Rugu because we interact a lot. Yesterday we were discussing one of the reports, and you will be surprised. In the year 2023-2024, this government, which claims to have no money, has paid 1.5 billion as commitment fee for loans we have signed for. We are not drawing, while we should be drawing from those loans to do development programs. We are paying commitment fee, 1.5 billion. Imagine what 1.5 billion would do. And that was just paying for a commitment fee. You sign for the loan, you are not using it, but since the loan is committed to you, you must pay. If you look at the loans, we have said many times.
Is this multilateral or bilateral?
All the loans in the country.
All the loans,
Now, what is happening?
What does then the commitment fee mean?
It means you are paying for a loan which you signed for. Okay. You know, normally if you sign between World Bank and Kenya, if you sign for a loan, World Bank commits to give you about 10 billion Kenya shillings. What it means is that money cannot be given to Bilo because it's already committed to Kenyan government. So if you're not drawing the money, you're not using the money because of your own internal challenges, you must pay a commitment fee. So once you sum, once you aggregate all the amount for commitment fee for different loans, the last financial 23-24, the government has paid 1.56 billion as commitment fee. The other thing, look at this. We have said many times, as people who are in this sector, that if you want to do well in loans, can you have project-specific loans? That once you take a loan, we know this loan is for this, And now most countries are going for what I would call program management kind of issues, so that once you get a loan, can we be clear on what are the expected targets out of that loan? And what benefit is going to bring to the country? So the way we manage our loan, I agree with the control of the control of budget.
Okay.
The thing is, I agree with what she's saying. These are things which are properly documented, but you see minimal effort in terms of addressing some of these basics, and that's, to me, I call it just poor financial management.
Which is what the IMF called. There must be the need of promotion of good governance, which must be entrenched. That was before the latest batch was dispersed.
Yes.
And then this clearly points to, Honorable Billo, coming to you, that these Bretton Woods institutions are pointing to you how to manage your own economy. In other words, address corruption is what they said.
Which is unusual. They rarely get into that issue of corruption.
Yes.
But I think
it's never mentioned.
they can see what's going on in the country and the way Kenyans are concerned. And you remember during the Gen Z, there were a lot of emails that have been sent to World Bank,
Yeah, World Bank,
Their contacts.
yes, the contracts and so forth. But actually, it's a very important issue. You know that if this government, if I were the president of this republic, I would focus on financial discipline. Look at what the Treasury CS said yesterday, that we are losing 2 billion daily. That's about a third of the budget is lost. The former president said the same.
720 billion in a year.
Yes, the former president said the same.
Same figure.
And even during the time of Kibaki, when Anyang' Nyong'o was, he said the same when he was the Minister for Planning, that a third of this country's resources are actually lost through corruption. And that is why I keep repeating that really if there was a focus on that issue of financial discipline, financial management, when you have a CS, as he did yesterday, announce, go on national TV and say, if only, people manage their resources, we don't have this. He has got the largest amount of power under the Public Finance Management Act as the CS Treasury to deal with all these issues of corruption. In fact, let me tell you, the office where the buck stops with regards to corruption in this government, in any government in this country, is the Treasury. Because the Treasury is the one that appoints all the accounting officers and all the powers regarding how the resources are to be spent. Really, it all's there. And the penalties, for the offenses are so huge, that you can actually deal with that situation. But when you always say, you speak as if you're helpless, so I think IMF, those guys are right. They should actually tie their loans to good governance. This happened during the time of Moi. It was, that happened in many parts of the world. When they find the situation is really bad, they put in those conditionalities. So that it becomes one. And I think it's good for the people because they want to see that you don't just collect money without proper governance. Because what happened during the Eurobond, that is the easiest case of where money could not be explained. It was a major debate in this country. $2 billion collected, and the government was having difficulty trying to explain where that money was spent, because what we always do is we borrow money as budgetary support, just put into the pool, and nobody knows where it goes. It goes into salaries and it goes into other things, and yet it's very clear that we should not borrow except for development purposes. So I think it's important that we deal with this issue of governance, and I think this governor, the president, should really. It's not about speaking about it. He had 2 years now repeating that he's going to deal with corruption, he's going to deal with this. But if you start ticking the boxes, you find there isn't much really. This thing is getting worse. And every Kenyan can see it. Every office is getting worse. The headlines are there. Yeah. You find universities 14 billion. The same universities are on strike for 9 billion only. So it's ridiculous.
To address the dons. But Odhiambo, again, to just point out this, because if you look at the first 9 months of the financial year 2023-24, on foreign travels alone, the president's administration, the Kenya Kwanza administration, spent an extra 4 billion compared to the previous financial year, according to the control of budget. What does then this say about the fiscal discipline needed for proper utilization of resources?
A lot. In the private sector, we say that it's the small changes that you make that consolidate into a major improvement. And you've seen this in sports. I was looking at the sports pages, and Gabriel Selassie of Ethiopia is saying that the improvement of the shoe itself has improved sports significantly. It's the same thing. We cannot, and I think we are in record as the country where our former deputy president, who is now the president, once said it's only 7 billion when we were talking about Aurora and Kimwerer. And you cannot say it's only 4 billion that has been lost in any venture, or in this case, the traveling. If we mean what we say by this austerity, then it needs to start from that travel. It needs to advance into the expenditures, the T expenditures that we see coming from the presidency. And then it needs to go into all the government agencies so that we see where that is going. Let me just try and do an analysis, because someone mentioned, and I agree totally, that a third of the government, a third of our budget goes into corruption. What this means is that we could actually do with 2/3 of our revenue can run this government. If we were sure that all the money we are getting goes into providing services for the country, 2/3 of our revenue could be sufficient to run this government. And what that also means is that then the tax rates that we are increasing day by day, and all these taxes that we are charging Kenyans, are actually unnecessary, because they are there to fuel corruption. What Mheshimiwa was saying, Mheshimiwa Bilo was saying, is that this government seems to be in a hurry. And the hurry, my brother, is not so much for development or for advancement of the interest of Kenyans. I submit to you that the hurry is eat as much as you can, as fast as you can, before your term ends. And I fear that that's the problem. If then we are losing around 1/3 of our budget is now around 800, 900 billion. This money could pay for university education for all the children in this country for the next 10 years. Actually, I think for the next 50 years. It could pay for doctors, it could pay for hospitals that we need, it could pay for medicines. This money is a lot. And so then I would agree with you that the small gains that you can make, even if it's just on traveling, would make a difference.
And Dr. Rugo, the government expenditure, according to the 2024 Economic Survey report, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics released on May the 20th, government expenditure grew by 26.6% to close to a Kenya shillings 3.98 trillion, which then means the government had borrowed 955 billion to bridge the deficit between revenue and expenditure. In that same period, however, there does not seem to be any major public project initiated by the government almost 2 years. The Exchequer has in that process struggled to release funding for key sectors, education and the devolved system of government. Yesterday, the COG had made a plea. The pending bill menace continues with people lacking capital. What exactly, or where exactly then, are the collected funds going?
It's difficult, but let me put this in a bit of context. So government expenditure growing at 26%, that has been the trend over the last maybe 5-6 years. Growth in expenditure, and basically when you talk about expenditure, we are saying how much year on year the government is spending to meet its obligations. But let me also say that in the same period, the revenue in terms of income that the government gets has been growing at an average of 10%. In other words, our expenditure is growing 3 times more than our revenue collection. But please remember that in that same year, about 1.5, about half, 1.5 thereabout, went to 1.5 trillion actually 1.6. went to debt payment. In fact, if you add plus all the others, I think it came to almost 2 trillion. It was significant. And therefore, then you are left with just about 1.9. This 1.9 is the amount of money that you transfer to county governments, 600 of which you spend on education. On teachers' salaries alone is about 390. And the space to actually introduce any new projects is actually not there. I mean, that's the point I'm trying to say. And this is not to try and explain the indiscipline and what have you. in that context. But remember, there are also other projects that were already ongoing that are supposed to be completed. And we also have a fair share of projects that have not been completed per se. But I think it is important for us to, and in this conversation, I'm always trying, I'm in a week where I'm actually trying to look for hope. As my strategy of guarding my heart.
For hope.
Gentlemen.
Some Bible verses.
No. We have to look for hope, Bala. Tutakufa. You know, if you deal with these numbers every day, you can get depressed. But so that's the context. That after if you deduct all the amounts that I have already mentioned, you start seeing why even after spending that amount, they are still pending bills of 600 billion. You know, they're still pending bills. But as we have been discussing here, I think it is also important to put in context that if the CS Mbadi's assertion, and because we think, I think we need to do some calculation, but it will be interesting to see what we arrived at. But let's work with the 2 billion that is being lost. You know, said by president now, by by cabinet secretary. You are saying that you are losing about, give and take, 700 billion. 700 billion is the equivalent of the amount of money you borrowed.
The deficit.
Yeah, yeah. It's actually it's almost 1 for 1. The deficit for last year was 718 billion.
Yeah.
So you lose 700 billion.
720 billion.
720 billion to be prospective. Are you saying then you lose everything you borrowed? 2, 720 billion at the disbursement rate of last year can run counties for a year and a half.
Not almost twice a year.
Yeah, 2 years almost. 2 years. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, a year and a half if you say 400 billion, you know, I'll give and take. The same amount can run the entire education sector for a whole financial year, assuming no wastage.
Yeah.
And the same amount, if you take the amounts of money that counties allocate to healthcare and the national government allocates to healthcare, can actually run you, because the total amount from both comes to about 250 billion per year. It means it can run you for actually 3 years of providing public health services. And therefore, the context I wanted to paint is that on one hand, you're spending a lot, your expenditure is growing a lot. On the other hand, you have cry of services that are not being delivered. And if you still have, and with the continued wastage, and therefore for me, with the continued wastage and theft, and I think we need to stop this glove language. I was laughing because we are trying to get the word corruption, even in the discussions of IMF. It seems a very difficult word to use. It's called governance challenges. Yet we know very well that if money was embezzled, when money has been embezzled in a certain department, take the example of the headlines today at Moi University. People should not be driven to EACC when they were in charge of the loss of the money.
What's the description? They
should be discussing from, if today you disappeared with a laptop from this company, after work you just say, no, this laptop, I know it's the company's, but wacha niweke mbili. You will not be discussing while on set here.
You'll be somewhere else.
You will be somewhere else in a police station, locked up, because you are a thief.
Or at home.
You know?
Or dismissed at home.
Or dismissed at home, fighting for your case to try and... Why is it that we have decided to use these, some surgical gloves, we clean up, oh, please come and record a statement, tell us. You cannot lose 2.2 billion. 2.2 billion is, if you brought it in cash, is an amount that would cover a fair share of this room. That is not money you lose. You lose 10 shillings. You lose your ATM card because that's a small piece. You cannot lose 2.2 billion. 2.2 billion was stolen, was embezzled, was taken by somebody, And therefore, for me, the rule of law, Abdi, if the rule of law is not going to become a reality, we can continue talking about how much expenditure, we can continue quoting all these figures out here, but all countries, and I said this yesterday, all countries that we admire have one thing in common. Rule of law is enforced. And there is no discussion about whether the rule of law is being applied to Ramogi, or to Abraham, or to Abdi, or to Stella. It is employed to all.
All right. And Dr. Makali Mulu, the PFM Act also mentions Parliament as a critical fulcrum in the making of our budget and financial management, having the power of the purse. Why has Parliament failed Kenyans in fixing first the budget loopholes? Because Parliament is key in that process, starting from adoption, formulation, up to its implementation, and as well as these reports that the Auditor General and the Controller of Budget present the Houses. Why has Parliament failed the Kenyan people in acting upon these critical reports?
A very good question. Let me start with the Auditor General reports. When they get to the House, they are discussed at two levels, either Public Accounts Committee or the PIC, Public Investment Committees, and now we have a number of them. There are about 3. So normally what would happen is people would discuss, but as usual, recommendation will be made. And normally because Parliament doesn't have the capacity to either prosecute or investigate, more likely they will be recommending this to the DCI, EACC, and then the other government agencies which are charged with that responsibility. And I think really we are Kenyans. Some of us have been questioning the effectiveness of some of these organizations. Like Daktari says here, these guys who have stolen 2.2, you push them to EACC. I can tell you for sure it will take another 1 year, and that thing will die a natural death. What will have happened behind the scenes is your guess, is mine. So what we are saying is, we must adhere to the rule of law, and we must make our institutions function. Because, you know, we have so many institutions in this country, like the issue of corruption. How many institutions in this country do work related to corruption? There are so many. But what is the outcome? I think if you ask any Kenyan, you don't have to do any research. Even perception out there is that these are just side shows. And I would want to say, just Parliament is the other institutions.
Yeah.
They have their own challenges. And we've said many times, it's public knowledge.
Yes.
The 13th Parliament where I serve, and I've served in many other parliaments in the past, I can tell you for sure, this one, 13th, has suffered serious capture by the executive. So even when many important decisions should be made objectively, at times we lose that objectivity. And 2 things from a political perspective. And to me, I want to just give this line. This line is very important, Ayub. I think it is time.
Yeah.
You know, the reason why people go out there and campaign to become president and form the executive is because you want to govern. So the reason why we all go through politics is so that people have the capacity and chance to govern. So I think it's time has come when we must stop politics and now start governing. And when we start governing, now governance issues come into play. Adherence to the rule of law, issues minimizing issues like corruption, and all those important aspects, respecting human rights, because those are governance attributes which you can't run away from. I think what we are suffering is we are still in the political, mood. We've not got into the phase of governing.
Okay.
We are yet to get to that phase where now we start governing. Can we now transit from politicking to governing? And I think if we do that, we'll be helping this country.
Yeah.
But all said and done, lamentations, most of us will lament on this table, others will lament in Parliament, others will lament in the executive. I think it's time we stop lamenting and get to real action. We need to see heads roaring. To me, I get 2.2 billion. And you're still a VC of a university.
You should have resigned.
And you have presided over that loss. And you are at the top.
Accountability then is, should be all-encompassing and the common denominator. Because if you look at the control of budget still, this is the 3rd quarter of the budget implementation report, which monitored the performance of the Finance Act 2023. Only 17% went into development expenditure out of the approved 2.7 trillion for spending. 74% went to state agencies, recurrent expenditure in their budget. Most development went into renovation. For example, state houses and state lodges. Huge proportion went into subsidies, travel expenditure. And Parliament is leading in the globe-trotting against the solemn duty of representation. Article 223 also to sneak in expenditures, including money meant for State House motor vehicles, 16% car for the Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Arid and Semi-Arid Lands, petrol subsidies, salaries for Forestry Department, and renovations across the State House and state lodges. Where is the priority?
A big challenge. Let's pick one of them.
Yeah.
Forget about the rest. The development. 17% expenditure on development. anybody who is a serious economist knows so long as you're not investing in development, you're not growing the economy. What have we done to our development budget in this country? We left a big share of that budget to development partners, so that you find our own resources, what we call our own revenue, which goes to development, is minimal. So a lot of these resources are tied to development partners. And then what happens is, because of the failure to prepare adequately in terms of signing the agreements in time and all that, you find that the money from development partners are not being, we are not observing those resources because we've not even done the preliminaries to access the money. So actually, if there's any suffering in this country, it's our development budget. And we've said many times, so long as you don't grow the cake, you will always start fighting for the small cake which you have, because it will remain constant, and then you're having more mouths to feed on that cake. So people will continue getting less and less of that cake, to an extent that then one day you'll have no cake to eat. So I think it's time we started pushing more resources to development. And from what we've discussed on this table, the issue of losing 2 billion every day, we are just in simple terms telling Kenyans, if we spend our resources well, if we go to what we are calling financial discipline, as Bill is saying, we have enough resources to push this country to the next level.
Yeah, and still on that, Honorable Kero, the economic survey also point out for the year 2024 that manufacturing for sugar declined by 40.7% in 2023. And this poses the question, because the president said sugar production has increased in his statement. Clearly, there seems to be a disconnect between what, for example, such crucial reports by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics point out, which is the single largest source of economic data and indicators, and the questions of then where are these manufacturers relocating to if there is a sharp decline, for example, in the production of such a crucial commodity like sugar.
I think you know what happened to the sugar last year, obviously. When the government came in, they allowed importation of duty-free sugar. You remember they waived duty, ostensibly to reduce the cost of living. And so when you allow cheap sugar to flood the market, then the local manufacturers cannot proceed. And you remember factories, the millers had to shut down for quite a while. And then because of the high cost of cane production and all that. So I think it's clear that government, policies itself played a role in terms of what happened in the sugar. But I think you'll be forgiven if you think that the president or any political leader would use the figures that are in the
economic survey report.
No, there would then be no politics. they have to they have to have figures that do not necessarily, they don't expect you to be checking what they say this is why Abraham has become radicalized in the last few years. He used to be very but the way he has been talking and nothing happens, he's now becoming more radicalized because you keep repeating the same thing and nothing happens.
Maybe it's a state of madness.
So I think clearly the government's responsibility, let me tell you, when a government comes to power, the issue is about the policies that the government will put in place to create that enabling environment for everybody else to succeed. That's basically what they're supposed to do. The government is not supposed to plant crops for you or run our TV stations or do things for us, but it's supposed to create that environment. And this they do through the policies. So when a policy is unfavorable, you remove it or you change it. But when government sometimes comes up with policies without regard to what is appropriate, then you get into a situation where every Kenyan now is asking for public participation because they feel that the government is doing some of these things in total disregard to what the people want or what is suitable. You know that's where the challenge is, and that's why you find then in some of the sectors, apart from I think maize, where because of the good weather we've had and the fertilizer input and so forth, but in almost all the other sectors, the tea, the coffee, the sugar, in every other sector, the challenges are there, and I think most of it has to do of not now. I remember when Kibaki came in, they had a whole strategic document they called revitalization of the agriculture, and one of the challenges they said was on the policies. There were just too many policies that govern in the agricultural sector that is making it very difficult for people who want to invest in that sector to do so. And the challenge is starting from land all the way to the cost of production. and and so forth. So I think it's not an easy area, but I think the government needs to really appreciate the fact that 80% of the people in this country depend on subsistence farming, depend on agriculture.
It's true.
That's where the jobs are created. That's where people are. So you need to focus more time. I know the government talks of digital, so many other things, but 80% of you need to have it at the back of your mind. 80% of your people depend on really what they put in the soil there, and you need to therefore find out how you can help through the different policies and different incentives, how to try and help the people in that area so that we can change the situation.
Yeah.
And Abdi, sorry, if I may.
Yes.
Just one thing, which I think will really go into the direction that Bilo is talking about. So yesterday, the different cabinet secretaries were signing their performance contracts.
Yeah.
But this was the second time. Normally, you normally have a report card of what happened in the past year. How did they an audit? Not even an audit, just a report card, a basic one. Our children come with report cards of what happened in the previous term, and then we discuss how they what they need to improve, what they need, and we encourage them, and all those kind of things. I had expected actually, and perhaps maybe I'm preempting, maybe that's what will be in the speech tomorrow, that this is how the different ministries performed. Because you see, these performance contracts are not just wishful, they're not just a tick the box. And I know Ramogi thinks I'm being very idealistic. Or rather, they should not just be a tick a box kind of a thing. They actually are the ones which should be committing. The CS for agriculture should actually be committing that this is the number of farmers we are going to improve, in terms of the support we are providing. The CS for education should be committing how they are going to be transitioning, what is going to be happening in CBC, so that then later, like the president said, when they come right now, perhaps yesterday, should have had some people even not signing performance contracts, saying, but you did not, we gave you time, to do your work, but nothing seems to be going on. Can we get somebody else? Because then that is how you start enforcing accountability within the framework.
Abraham, they signed. Yeah. You see, no one was stopped from signing because he didn't perform. That means everybody got A. That's why they were told to continue signing.
No, we don't know.
And this is despite, Abraham, to point out on Honorable Kero, the last time out when the head of state presided over that function at State House on the 2nd of August 2023, he was not pleased with his cabinet ministers and his PSs. Some of them, he said in public that they have no knowledge of their docket.
Yeah.
At times he picks up the goal, seeks some explanation, but they are not in the know. The PS is the same. And the former deputy president even further castigated them for changing clothes at airports. And at times he can't convene subcommittee cabinet meetings at his current residence because of quorum hitches. I mean, if that is what they said in public, then headed by the president, what sort of other report card would you need if you have cited them for incompetence?
But you just said the ideal situation, Ayub.
Yeah.
In a situation where you are evaluating performance,
yes,
you start with what is the score before you determine the next level. That's always the case. What did you score in the last financial year before we give you a target for the coming year? Because in a situation where you score a D and we want you to go to a A, that's beyond expectation.
And is there a cutoff? If you don't perform to this level, you don't sign again.
The best situation, we might be doing it differently. When he gives a general statement, like saying it's not going to be business as usual. That's what he said. It's not going to be a business as usual. But that is not good enough. We want to hear finance, you declared targets. What did you achieve? Go to agriculture, go to mining, so that by that case then, we will be able to see the totality of government performance. And we see who is pulling the government back, who is pushing it up. Unless we do that, then we are not helping this. This becomes just a normal exercise. It's what I will call public show.
Yeah, so it needs to be disaggregated. So
and also reward those who have performed well.
Reward performance.
So we're not just saying.
By the way, there was an announcement this morning by the Public Service Commission in relation to the application for
principal secretaries.
That was released just yesterday. This is a call for the application for the position of principal secretary in the public service, and the communication which was issued yesterday by the PSC after that event at State House here in Nairobi. But Honorable Makali Mulo, coming to you, still with you. If you were the president, and I deliberately use the word were,
yes,
what would be...
One day I will.
What is hope?
Every member of parliament dreams of becoming president.
Because the former Eldoret North member of parliament
Yes.
He is a president.
has become our president.
Yeah, president, yeah.
Anyway, all our presidents, except I think, not sure of Jomo Kenyatta, the others, members of parliament, or Moi served as a vice president. What would be your State of the Nation address on education, health, state of our security, and infrastructure?
I think for me, health I will be telling Kenyans things are not working, but we'll work to fix them. I'll first of all accept that things are not working. Because the more I listen to the president talk about health issues, I always wonder whether intelligence is helping him. Because he seems to be believing that things are working while they are not working. And you know, I was asking myself yesterday when I was listening to him talk about how they are going to push SHIP and SHA to the next level. And I was asking, what the president works for who?
The people.
For the people. So if you are the president and the people are saying, this dose you are giving us is not treating our problem, would you not call for a situation where you sit and ask yourself, what are the challenges? And then you fix them. Because there are three sectors which Kenyans have said they don't think. One of them is health sector, education sector, in a mess because of the university new financing model, issues of the strike. That's another sector which is not working. So those two sectors, education and health, while they are very important primary sectors because they are the social sectors of this country, they don't seem to be working. And if I were the president, I'll start by saying, we did commit ourselves to improve these sectors. 2 years down the line, I don't think we are where we should have been. So we will be pleading the Kenyans to allow you more time to fix the sectors, but first of all, accept that they are not working. In the area of roads, what is happening is you've seen this outcry everywhere, that some regions of this country are getting almost the lion's share of the budget of the roads, the infrastructure budget, while others are not getting. Okay. So I'll be addressing the issue of equity. How do I ensure that Northeastern Kenya is benefiting from the resources there, because they are taxpayers like everybody else. So I'll be addressing the issue of roads more of equity in terms of ensuring that these roads we are doing, whether tarmac, whether grading, they are being done in a way there's equity in the country, because that's the matter coming up.
And then allow me to finish up on you, then come to Honorable Bilokero and Mr. Ramogi and Dr. Rugo. There is a matter before Parliament, and this is doesn't need complex scientific process or thinking. It's plain white mathematics. For example, in January this year, Safaricom offered to provide the Ministry of Health with an integrated universal health care system to help implement it over 10 years. The total cost was 48.3 billion, including taxes. But somewhere along the way, enter Adani Group and the consortium, that number went up to 104 billion. So the difference is 56 billion Kenya shillings. The same services, e-claims, patients portal, e-learning, telemedicine, training and support, health cloud data centers, security and support solutions, pharmaceutical information system. The variance is the number. Is this an area that Parliament should be focused on as we talk about this chaotic transition?
It is an area, and actually our health committee has already given commitment on the floor of the House that they are following up on this matter. I do believe they will be able to tell us what really happened. Because what as you rightly put it, that's the digital system, which is costing 104 billion. Look at what we are allocating to the actual budget, which is supposed to cater for Kenyans in terms of healthcare. It's minimal. I think I don't know whether it was you or some who was analyzing the figures, and you are saying it's a quarter of what should be allocated. Is what we have allocated as a Parliament. So what we are saying is that the earlier debate, you remember the earlier debate, and this are done debate all over it's all over the country, it's not new. I think that we might not be having the facts in terms of what is up, but I think there could be some deals being cut. And this is a perception all over the country, that these deals relating to Adani are not deals which are there to support this economy grow. They are deals which are there for particular individuals or particular companies to make their cut and move to the next level. So to me, the way I look at it, that sector that particular day is something which needs to serious investigation, because the same Safaricom, which was giving the total of 48 billion, is part of the consortium now, which has pushed it to 104. So you ask yourself, if they were able to do the same assignment at 48 as one company, by bringing more ANSI to it to make it a consortium, they are now charging 3 times. I think what they have done, they have just multiplied the figure by 3 so that they get to the figure. But security is, but you raised an issue on security. I think I need to comment on that before you go to Bill. The issue of security. If I were the president coming to the house tomorrow, I will address 2 issues on the security. Abductions, which have happened. This kind of Kenyans don't know where their loved ones are. Could be, people are saying security agencies, could be other people, but we are saying this, the president should be able to tell Kenyans, how do we make sure that these Kenyans are found wherever they are? And the other matter is issues of human rights abuses. You saw the other day, the IG was in a parliamentary committee on administration and internal security. And those issues came out strongly, that the Kenyans we represent are concerned about issues of human rights abuses and abductions.
And this morning, the Ugandan papers reported Kizza Besigye is missing in Kenya. The wife is a senior UN AIDS official. And she said,
Abdi, unless you want to bench me, I feel marginalized.
No, please, I was coming to you. It's your turn, Honorable Kero.
I wanted to comment on a few things. First of all, the figure is 800 billion, not 700, the corruption figure. It's 2.2 billion. If you look at our income, our annual revenue is at 2.4 trillion now. A third of that is 800 billion. But also if you calculate 2.2, not 2 billion, you don't round it off, Daktari. You do 2.2, you get 800 billion. So I was right. I was wondering, why is my figure very different from Daktari's?
It's early in the morning.
The second thing that I wanted to say is about the State of the Nation address that I'm looking forward to tomorrow. The president needs to face reality, that the ground is hostile, and it's not hostile because we are just in the opposition. Contrary to popular opinion, I think right now opposition is more government than government itself. We are not sure who is opposition or who is the other. I had a discussion the other day with someone in government, and I was wondering, why are you guys insisting on some of these changes? And the response is that, you know, a government is only celebrated after its term. So that now, for example, when Kibaki was in power, we were not very happy with some of the changes he was doing. But after his term, now we started to appreciate.
Okay.
And I'm like, things like health, you feel in real time if the health services are working or they are not working. And this is the situation we have. SHIF and SHAF, allow me just to call them that, are not working, and Kenyans are communicating the same to the president. Things like education, you can actually see whether there are learning outcomes for young people who are graduating, or they are so free to the extent that any opportunity to go for man-to-man, they are willing to be there. Okay. And I think that needs to be spelled out to the president, and the president needs to address these issues as early as tomorrow.
Thank you. Yes, Honorable Kero, briefly.
I think there's no doubt in my mind that Kenyans are not concerned so much about why the government is about how the government is doing things. For example, the universal health coverage is something that I agree. It started during the time of Ngilu when she was the minister. I remember in 2006. We have been fighting. So, and everybody wants that opportunity to get every Kenyan covered through a health insurance scheme. That one, I think nobody doubts it. But the question regarding that and many of the other government projects is about the how they go about doing it. You know, could it be done better? Could it be done more cheaper? It's the same reason, and these questions are justified about how, because of what happened, for example, on SGR. You remember, we kept saying, look, we want the SGR, fine, but look at what Tanzania has done, what Uganda's, you know, Ethiopia has done. They've done it at a fraction of the cost that we spend. So we're always looking at issues as Kenyans on how, and the government needs to listen really. And if there's a better way of doing things, for heaven's sake, which would happen if you listen. If you don't listen, then it becomes a very difficult thing. And that is the challenge, I think, with this government, like all other governments that we have had, is that they don't listen to Kenyans. Okay. And that's our challenge.
Yeah. Yes, Dr. Rugo.
Yeah, I think for me, let's face a moment of honesty. So I want to agree with my colleagues here. I think the president owes it to this country. He has said a lot. And sometimes when you speak a lot, you send very different messages to different people. This is about life and death. We are not talking about hypothetical people. We are talking of real people who are dying. I believe the churches, part of the reason perhaps they are also up in arms is because they are the ones who bury, they are the ones who provide counseling to all these families. And I'm sure even the other religious leaders would be in the same position. They are overwhelmed by just the needs in society. So a moment of honesty that this is the hole we are in. But two, I think a very clear roadmap on what actions are going to be taken. Because there's been a lot of promissory notes of things that will be done into the future. But most importantly, I think it is critical that starting now, the discussion about how we create employment locally has to be held.
Okay.
Actions about, because we have so many people, not just young people. Of course, the majority are those between 15 and 24. They account for about 75% of the unemployment in the country based on the statistics. And that's not 65%, that's not a small number of the total, unemployment. If we don't do something about those people, we are killing a generation into the future. Remember that whereas we are talking about Gen Zs, the people in that particular age group, this is also the group that grows to be providing, it's the productive group that basically is also supporting. They are also starting to get children, the generation beta, as we call it. And there is a connection. But lastly, the way education reforms are being handled is not right.
Okay.
And that has a multiplier effect. The reason why we are enjoying the country we have today is because many who could never have entered a school, a classroom, got that opportunity in 2003,
Thank you.
2004. So for me, those are things I hope they will, but I am looking for action, not more talk.
Thank you.
Action.
Tomorrow, the head of state will be expected to address the nation on some of those very critical issues that are happening in the country. Bill Okero, FCPA, is the former Mandera County Senator and political economist. Odhiambo Ramogi is an economist as well as the CEO of Elim Group. And we also had Dr. Abraham Rugo, who is the Executive Director of Budget Hub, and Dr. Makali Mulu, an economist, also the lawmaker representing Kitui Central Constituency and a member of the Budget and Appropriations Committee. All eyes will be on Parliament tomorrow when the President will be addressing the joint sitting of the bicameral setup. Up next is Safina Chieng Ouma with health and lifestyle. And here tomorrow morning on Thursday on the State of the Nation, Trevor will be here. Till then, good morning.